One of my early school reports said something along the lines of, if Orlando wasn't, looking out the window, daydreaming, or in the hamster cage, he'd be a very valuable member of the class in some form or another.
I get very distracted because other things can be much more interesting sometimes. Sometimes my mum goes, like, Rafi, you need to do your homework. And then I've forgotten I had my homework, so then I'm like, I don't have any homework.
As a kid, I struggled to absorb information, and that was frustrating, I think.
I think every child obviously learns at a different pace, and I mean, that certainly was me.
I probably have to think a bit more and kind of really work stuff out.
I lose my bag, and it's quite a hard thing to lose because it's quite big. And, yeah. Oh, I can't find my pencil case at the moment.
So dyslexia is a brain-based difference in how we process information. And certainly that's going to affect reading, writing, and spelling, but it can also have a huge impact on how individuals organize information, how they're able to concentrate on certain tasks.
You would expect someone who is dyslexic to really struggle with their working memory. And working memory is the information that you can take, hold in your brain, and then manipulate and do something with.
Most people can manage up between 5 and 7 elements of information, but many dyslexics can probably only cope with 3 or 4.
So many dyslexics tend to have relatively slow processing, which I think it's important to understand has nothing to do with intelligence.
They like to think. We need to give them time to do that. Dyslexic people like to think. They like to think about what you've asked them, and they need time to give you the answer. But they're often thinking because they're good thinkers and they're going to give you something amazing in their response.
When those 15 hands go up in the air, don't immediately call on somebody because you may be missing out on a dyslexic student who's still processing the question or coming up with the answer.
Many dyslexics might struggle with verbal memory. So if we give them instructions and we only say them out loud and we expect them to hold on to all of that information, many dyslexics might have a difficult time with that.
So an easy thing a teacher can do is give the directions. They could write them on the board, and then they could chunk them. Pencil, notebook, sit on the floor. If you have a student that you know struggles with those things, have that student repeat the directions, and you're helping every student.
Many dyslexics might actually have a difficult time with their locker combination, that sequential memory, that ability to instantly remember to go 3 to the left, 4 to the right.
If you're teaching someone, you're expecting them to have sequential memory, because all the time teaching is working on what a child has learned before. If a child struggles to sequence things, they won't remember what it was they were meant to take from before. So often I say to the children who work with me, let's mind map what you did in the last lesson. So we'll produce a mind map, and with a mind map, you're putting the learning in the middle and you're making the connections visual. The next time they come to me, I'll say, okay, so from what you learnt in that last mind map, how did you build on that in the next lesson? And they will add to the mind map they've done before, so they can start to see a sequence of events.
Because they're bigger picture thinkers, they might not see things in chronological order.
The more detail-oriented work of doing step 1, step 2, step 3, that can be a challenge.
The average thinker may get from A to B very quickly. It's like they're on a highway. But what I tell my students is that the dyslexic brain is more like you're taking the scenic route. And it may take them longer to get from A to B, but think of all the things they're going to see.
Dyslexic learners tend to be very, very good and talented at coming up with complex, exciting ideas. But when it comes to actually translating those and putting them from mind onto paper, it can be very difficult because we're asking them to do a lot of things all at once. Not only do they have to represent these words through spelling, which can be a challenge, they also have to think about, how do I organize it? How do I take these ideas and put them in a more systematic, logical sense?
When you say, well, what were you trying to say? And in their heads, they've got a whole story. And you say, yes, but this is a half an hour task and it needs to have a beginning and middle and an end, and you have to structure it this way. And immediately the child is, oh goodness, where do I begin?
So a great simple thing to help is to give them an opportunity to pre-write, to organize, to use a graphic organizer, to get all their ideas out on paper, and now they're not having to pull that information out of their brain, it's right next to them.
Many dyslexic learners will struggle with organization in and outside of the classroom. Keeping up with papers, keeping up with the order of a classroom and how materials need to stay organized.
They may need more structure and support than you might think. Your classroom really needs to have systematic organization systems. Everything has a place.
My students know what to expect on a daily basis. They know the routine, they know the materials they need.
They love to know what's going on. It helps relieve anxiety. There's no mystery about the day. They know what's coming next. So something a teacher can do is just make sure that schedule is on the board. It's on their desk. The student could take a picture of it if they have a cell phone or an iPad or anything like that.
So many of our students have difficulty with concentration, and I know every teacher knows the student that is somewhat peering off or becomes occupied with something in their desk.
I see a child who's looking out of the window because they're thinking about what you've said, they're processing it, and they're going to give you an incredible answer in a minute when they've worked out how they're going to say it.
These daydreamers are really just innovators and explorers of new ways of thinking.
A great thing a teacher can do is prompt them ahead of time. Give them that cue and call them by name and let them know that I'm going to give you information right now, and when I'm done, I'm going to have you summarize, or I'm going to have you answer this question. And that really just brings them back into the classroom.
If you have a difficult time organizing your ideas, if you have a difficult time organizing and following through on sequential tasks, it can have a huge impact on standardized and normed assessments.
Unless you're giving something completely unseen and you're asking someone to apply what they know, you're always measuring someone's memory.
Bite-sizing, taking a large amount of information and reducing it into something that can then prompt the mind for a revision purpose is quite a task for a dyslexic student. So they usually need some help with that.
With processing, as soon as you add pressure, you find it harder to reproduce the information.
Until we actually review the way that we're benchmarking and measuring our children, we're never truly going to be enabling dyslexic children to show what they can do.
So we need to give them more time and tools in order to interpret those really impressive, creative, amazing ideas, in order to interpret those and translate those into our academic expectations.
Every kid's got to feel some sort of achievement. And I think that's where we're lacking. We've got to give kids as many opportunities to feel that they're achieving something.
I wish teachers were aware of the yin and the yang with dyslexia, because there are some challenges, but the imagination, the storytelling, the communication, the empathy, all these positives are sometimes sort of neglected within the school system.